Hello there and welcome to this video from me, Josh Wright from racingtoprofit.co.uk. I hope you're having a glorious day. Liverpool is basked in sunshine, which makes a nice change, hopefully a sign of things to come. The aim of this video, well, there's going to be four, I think, and it's a look back at the Cheltenham Festival. You can see there's a few notes there in front of you, hopefully, and hopefully you can see me in the bottom right hand corner and hear me well enough also. Yeah, the aim really is to look at the 4 days, look at my approach very much with a focus on next year, and looking at some of the things we can learn, or I can learn, in terms of the content and the approach, some of the things we can do a bit differently, etc., and things we can take away, looking at certain horses as well, things that may crop up from my memory about things we can take moving forwards. I thought I'd just start with the week that was, mainly for my own self-indulgence, because you have to enjoy festival weeks like that. Apparently it appears quite a few people struggled, but there we go, I won't comment on that. But yeah, so the week that was, I covered 13 races at the Cheltenham Festival, the 10 handicaps plus the National Hunt Chase, RSA and the Albert Bartlett, which are the 13 races I like to focus on. Occasionally I'll throw in the Gold Cup as well, but I didn't really have any strong thoughts on that this year. I managed to find 4 winners, thankfully, from the stats, shortlists and winning profiles, and we'll flick through some of those, look at the shortlists, look at races where they didn't work so well, and the kind of learning points we can take. I keep saying I can take forwards for next year and through big race analysis in general. The 4 winners, we had Tiger Roll at 16s, Tully East at 12s, Presenting Percy at 11s, and the kind of winners that really make the week profit wise, Champagne Classic 25s. Coincidentally, if any of you saw Michael O'Leary's interview after that winner on RUK, disgraceful really. What a classless man. But there we go, I won't comment any further on that. I shouldn't moan too much really, because horses carrying his colours have provided me now with, I think, my 4 biggest winners of the festival in the last 3 or 4 years. Tiger Roll and Champagne Classic, Very Wood in the Albert Bartlett in 2014 at 50 to 1, and Empire of Dirt last year in the Stable Plate at 20 to 1 also, which is a race they won this year as well, so that's something to note moving forwards. As an aside, I did actually, this video will have a kind of feel of me flipping around things as things come into my memory. I was just going to mention actually, before that Champagne Classic race in the Martin Pipe, I remembered that, let me just get the system builder tool up here for anyone that has horse race base. Let me see, yes, that's within the camera shot. As you can see here in the horse data all categories, there's actually an owner category now, so you can well, you can look at in general, and you can see the owners they've got there listed, which includes Gigginstown House Stud, JP McManus, which is obviously useful for the festival. And I started doing breakdowns within the for the Martin Pipe, when I realised and kind of forgot the owner tab was there. I did a breakdown of the Martin Pipe by owner, and Gigginstown were one from 3 places from the 6 runners they've had in it to date, and the Martin Pipe, and that's was only going 8 years before this season. I think JP was maybe 0 from 13, 1 place or something, if my memory serves me correct. But anyway, there's that tool there for any of you horse race base users. You know, there might be systems based around owners actually, and I will write that down as that comes into my head, because I'm sure we can find something owner based, possibly. JP McManus in handicaps that haven't placed for a while or something. Anyway, that's food for thought and something I can add to my list for another day. So that was the week that was, yeah, for the festival winners. Also had Chaser Spud on Saturday in the Midlands National, which added to profits this year. In 2015, I think my Cheltenham tips lost about 7 points, and we tipped the winner at 9 to 1 or 11 to 1 of the Midlands National, so that's quite a good race. Well, has been a good race for the blog. Thankfully this time Chaser Spud added to the week's profits, and the members club, the normal daily post, also had a 18 to 1 winner for the ratings pointers 10 to 1 approach, which I know some of the festival subscribers had a go at also. That was Best Scott Spring. So all in all, that was a rather fun and enjoyable week, and you have to enjoy them because I'm bound to back quite a few losers now. And the Cheltenham Festival is tough. It's the hardest punting puzzle of the year. I won't be winning 43 points every year. I might do better one year. I may lose 20, 40 points one year as well, or probably more than one, because that's the nature of the beast. It's very tough, but the stats worked in general, so I'm doing what I normally do and kind of ramble on. And I should try and get to the point really. So yeah, focus on next year, day by day review, touch on race by race, any horses for the notebook. That's mainly relying on my memory, so we'll see what that kind of highlights. What went well, what didn't, what I can learn for next year, and generally in terms of race analysis. A few kind of tidbits as I go through some of the races, and those will become clearer in a moment. Old course versus new course, field size and pace, that kind of, those theories held up again to a certain extent. The four who got away, there were four horses that the stats, whether they were microsystems or the big race shortlists from the winning profiles, that were highlighted that I didn't tip, and I think the four that were highlighted and could have been found, most notably Flying Tiger, but I'll get to him when we get to the Fred Winter on day 2, but I'll touch on those and kind of what lessons we can learn from those particular horses for next year. And class, which is in relation to Arctic Fire, on Tom Sport 2 as well, and Super Sunday, kind of issues around looking at the top of the handicap, ignoring kind of certain trends and stats, and actually having a focus on the really class horses in the race and whether or not you can make a case for them, because the quality seems to be improving year on year, and looking at ratings and weight trends is maybe something should be kind of secondary and third factors after other factors. So that in front of you can see the Cheltenham Resources post, so that's what all members, usual kind of monthly subscribers and festival subscribers had access to. All the stats in there were the source of all the winners on the blog, and it's probably best if I jump to day 1, and I'll flip between here and the advert strewn racing post, which is a site I rarely visit but I suppose is useful for the odd thing. So what have we got? What am I going to look at? Right, yes, let's just run through the races I tipped in, some of the shortlists, and we'll go from there and hope my memory holds up. So we had, let's start with race 1, actually on the day of the Supreme Novices Hurdle, and some kind of thoughts, especially for the preview circuit next year. Number 1, pay attention to anything Jamie Codd says, otherwise known, and I think he's been named the Codfather by the Final Furlong podcast. If you don't listen to the Final Furlong podcast, I would add it to your list, because I think it's just great fun. Always a good laugh, always something of interest. They don't much like big race stats and trends and such like, but more fool them. We don't want everyone having a stats-based approach using the angles we do, but that's by the by. Anyway, Jamie Codd, I think would tell anyone who listened, and I found this out after the back one, of course, who he was 50 to 1 generally for a while. A monkey had refused 3 times his last 6 runs. Many people said, how could you back him? Well, you could back him because he was 50 to 1, and you can make excuses, any number of them, if you're getting a horse at 50 to 1. Jamie Codd had said, I think Gordon Elliott had said, others had said pre-race that, I know Jamie Codd had definitely said on one of his previews that he's the best workhorse I think he's ever seen, and if he transferred any of his ability to the racetrack, he would go very close to winning the Supreme Novices Hurdle. I know a few people I know through Twitter and other things who I think on the back of that just had a few pounds each way at 50s. He was tipped in a few places as well on a few other blogs, so well done those people who took in that information and had a dart on, in fairness, you know, what I know about novice hurdles, grade 1 races and unexposed horses you could write on the back of a postage stamp, but even I could tell that that race had an open feel to it and that it might have a bit of a shock. I think we should mark up the run of Mellon, given this was only his second career start, and I don't say that from a position of some expert on times or horses such as this, but more from the fact that I think horses that had only had one career start in the Supreme were kind of the last 16 runners had finished unplaced going into the race, so I suppose he could be marked up, and this was of course the start of the Willie Mullins downfall, which was all a bit strange. We got to Thursday with all kinds of madness being discussed about Willie Mullins being his string being ill, being out of form, which given the number of horses that he had placed was an absolute load of nonsense. But there we go, that's by the by. So yeah, Supreme Novices Hurdle, the back, mainly focusing on him just for the Jamie Codd thing for next year. He will probably get invited to many more previews, but I think he actually buys and sources a lot of horses as well, especially for the Gordon Elliott yard. I may have that wrong, but he clearly knows the time of day, and as we've seen actually in his race riding, he's a superb jockey around Cheltenham as well. So that's something to note down for next year. A lot of these preview panels are just hot air and a load of nonsense. People tipping Mellon when he's 3-1. The mind boggles, doesn't it really? Anyway, moving on, the Arkle. The Arkle's the Arkle. I'm not going to add anything of use for you there. Then we got on to our race, the first main tipped race. I will click on the pipe winner. My computer is very slow, it'll probably crash. So yeah, I just wanted to touch on Tomsport 2 because if I whiz down on day 1, I'll whiz back up again in a moment. So yeah, the stats profile for the Ultima helped to a point. I mean, it helped cut the field in half pretty much. The profile was pretty strong. It pointed towards more lightly raced chasers, but that still had some kind of experience, and a few different other pointers. Well, we can see what some of those pointers were here for the Ultima. So the winning profile, age 10 or younger, 18 or fewer chase runs, 0 to 3 chase wins, etc, etc. I think that list of 12 based on those first 6 bullet points. My aim always with these big races is to try and use as fewer profile points as possible to get a manageable shortlist, from then which we can apply some kind of form analysis, because otherwise the more filters you use, the kind of more, you know, the higher likelihood you are of just kind of chopping off a winner that may have you know, fallen down on something or other. But I like to have a winning profile that pointed towards 12, which wasn't, you know, still a long list but more manageable, and I myself could cut out quite a few of those for one reason or the other. And the winner was on it, on Tomsport 2 was on that list. He was also on the list, no, I don't think he did quite qualify last year, but he did qualify on the micro angles for pipe that I had last year, and this time, as you can see there in the micro systems I researched, he qualified in the previous festival winners handicap chase. That angle did quite well, I think, over the week. The track last time out, so horses that ran at Cheltenham with a few certain conditions, plus a Tom Scudamore micro angle as well. So why is he one that got the way? Because when going through the race, I had the impression, and I did feel like because any of the winners were going to break one stat or the other. It wasn't, unlike some races during the week, it wasn't the kind of perfect profile. And it had the feel that something might go and that it might be weight, just because for one reason or other there'd been a few kind of high weighted horses kind of running well. So and the fact, I should state, that he won last year, of course. So from a purely handicapping perspective, if we look at him here, I mean, he carried 11 stone 12. He's a big horse. 11 stone 12 clearly isn't a problem in terms of actual weight. You know, he's fairly lightly raced since he won. Where are we here? So yeah, 15th of March last year. And what was his rating? It was 148, so he was only £7 higher. Now, he won by 7 lengths. £7 wouldn't have stopped him last year. And clearly the extra £5 actual weight on his back wouldn't have stopped him last year. So given that, he kind of, I suppose on that point, because I wanted to get a kind of narrower shortlist, I was a tad bit blinded by the weight. And you want to chop horses out, I suppose, and find reasons not to back them. That was clearly wrong, because all the other positives in terms of the number of micro angles he hit, and the fact that he'd won the race last year, and if he'd come into the race with the same rating, etc., he would have run well. And the thinking there for me to learn for the future, and it's a wider point for the week next year, is having more of an each-way mindset. Now, my approach didn't used to be, when I kind of tipped on the blog and have done since whenever, 2014 or whenever it was, November 2014 onwards, is to kind of, I used to go half a point each way for horses that were 20 to 1 or 33 to 1, but when I look back over one of the years or year and a half, just backing them all 1 point win was much more profitable, because I do find big price winners and you want to get paid on them. So I need to do a bit of thinking for next year in terms of staking and how we bet and the amount we bet, and whether or not that is going with half a point each way and half a point win, whether or not I give us, say, a 40-point bank. This year we had a 25-point bank, that was the amount I was happy to lose if the wheels totally fell off, and you know, to cut your losses and said that was a bad week. All of you 80 or so who joined for the festival week will probably get your refunds, and we'll move on tail between our legs. Thankfully that didn't happen, but it's always a possibility, and it will happen at a Cheltenham Festival at some point in the future, just because it's a bloody tough week. So yeah, I need to think about betting each way. I think if I'd have recommended 1 point each way on all the tips, and of course I'm saying this with hindsight, we'd have ended up pretty much around double I think our points return, because of the number of horses that placed. And also that each way mindset may make me more likely to tip a horse like on Tom Sport 2, who was 14-16 to 1. With those stats, while I may think, oh, single farm payment should have more in hand, he's more progressive, there's no reason why on Tom Sport 2 shouldn't run his race. And you'd have thought if he repeats his performance from last year, he's going to be bang there. He repeated his performance from last year, and he was bang there. Sadly for us, or me, single farm payment didn't hold on. I know some of you backed on Tom Sport 2, so you'll be glad that he did hold on given the odds, and well done for using the information on the blog post better than I did, but that's the whole point of doing it the way I do. So that was that race. Measure of My Dreams, he didn't run very well. He may be a horse to keep an eye on. I would keep an eye on and track, and I should keep an eye on and track a lot of my tips from the Cheltenham Festival, because if my memory serves me right, a few from last year, or one handicap hurdler in particular, or two maybe, there was Call the Cops, if my memory is right. I was testing here. Call the Cops, Nicky Henderson, I think I tipped him in a handicap hurdle race, and he went to win at Punchestown. And there was another one, Waxy's Dargle, tipped him as well each way. I think he came 6th, and some of you backed him each way because there were 6 places. I probably took the foolish route, and I did take the foolish route, I know, and well, went for 5 places or 4 or whatever, because there were bigger odds. And I believe, if I'm correct, he may have come out not necessarily at the spring festivals, but some point in autumn, or maybe at Galway somewhere. Anyway, he came out and won within his next 3 starts at kind of 25 to 1. And especially for the hurdle races, because a lot of the big race profiles and stats are for unexposed horses. or sorry, point towards unexposed horses. 0 to 2 handicap hurdle runs, 0 to 5 hurdle runs, etc., etc. So the stat shortlist and what I end up tipping in some of those are horses you would expect to improve at some point. And if they've run well in a big festival handicap, it's obviously highly likely that they like a good pace, they like a strong pace, they like good ground, they handle a big field. So some of those are worth keeping an eye on. So Measure of My Dreams, he was lightly raced. That was a bit of a punt. It didn't come off this time. But that might be one to keep an eye on. Single Farm Payment ran very well. I think the weights and revisions have come out today as I speak, which is Tuesday the 21st of March. I think he's only gone up £4. He's a strong traveller. He generally jumps well. Clearly a big field is no problem to him now. Clearly the festival atmosphere is no problem. We may expect to see him back here next year. Tom George is the brilliant trainer of handicap chasers, and a very good trainer in general, but especially with his chasers, and he will be one to keep an eye on. The way he travels, you would think a flat track probably wouldn't be a problem, but it looks like kind of a strong pace and something to aim at is. So that's him. The 450, we have the what was that? National Hunt Chase. I can skip down to some of the stats for this. Where are we? So yeah, the stats. There was only 2 filters. I only needed 2 filters to get the short list of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, which, as you can see in front of you, also included Haymount, who was, let's have a look. He was placed at a big price. Yes, he was third at 33 to 1. Notebook, put him in your notebook because he absolutely clouted the first or second fence, I think, from memory, or was impeded. Anyway, it put him on the back foot. He was then had kind of right out the back. And in this race, nothing came from the back really. Tiger Roll was third, fourth the whole way round, always tanking, which was rather exciting. It was just a question of if he would take one fence with him too many. Still not quite sure how he won. Clearly a horse laden with ability. Missed Approach. I know some of you backed him each way because he was a qualifier. Well, he had the first time headgear angle at 50 to 1, so that was a good return for some of you. It'll be interesting to see if he responds to that headgear again, but again, that was another horse, first time headgear, raced prominently. He led for most of the way. I haven't looked at times. I'm not sure what the time boys would say, and girls, and whether or not that race was run at it wasn't run at a crawl, but whether or not they could have gone quicker. The fact the front 2 that filled the front 2 places were pretty much up there the whole way suggests that it wasn't as strongly run as maybe you would expect. And Missed Approach actually, I think, pretty much had an uncontested lead for most of it, or whatever horse was taking him on, I forget. They were kind of lobbing along at their own pace. So given Haymount's error early on, the fact he had to come from further back in a race where the pace didn't collapse, where the leaders didn't kind of fall into a hole, I think we can mark that run up. So it'll be interesting to see what they do with him. He stays. Whether or not he stays a stronger run 4 miles, but any kind of marathon tests that might be of interest. So put him in your trackers and remind me when I fail to highlight him when he runs next, which of course I have form for doing. So yeah, that was the shortlist. 2 to 4 runs at the track is a positive. So yeah, there was a couple of other pointers which only pointed to 2 horses. People said, when horses are a certain price, I mean, he ticks so many boxes. He was trained by Gordon Elliott, as you can see there, and John Joe, Alan King, Gordon Elliott had won 6 of the last 10 renewals between them, which again was another tick. When they tick all those boxes and they're kind of 14 to 1, 16 to 1, you do just have to go with it, I think, which is a lesson that I learned and then forgot for the Fred Winter that came the next day. You can tell by now that's still painfully lodged in my mind, but we'll get onto that in a moment. But yeah, there are questions over his stamina. I always think of the young master whenever I think of a horse and a chaser and will they stay. Trained by Neil Mulholland, flatbred I think, out of a 7 furlong horse or something, and he stayed really well in a couple of 3 mile chases. He effectively won the Badger Ales, didn't he, at Wincanton a couple of years ago, but was disqualified on a technicality. not having enough chase runs or something. But so it happens, and I've never been one. My breeding has never really affected my punting at all. I may, if a horse is stepping up in trip, look to see if they're related to X and Y, but they're trying something new. A load of the horses in the National Hunt Chase had never run over 4 miles before. We had no idea if they would stay, and in that context you want to take a price, which we did. Tiger Roll absolutely carted himself around. He travelled so strongly. Brilliant ride from the jockey who just let him jump, because he's an awful jumper. As Gordon Elliott said, he headbutts his fences. That's just him. If you'd have been more forceful, he probably would have fallen. So the jockey deserves great credit there. I'll touch on Arpège de Laine. Notebook, put him in your notebook. Mainly because, again, I think Paul Nicholls said before the race that the Scottish National may be an aim. Now, if that's the case, and again you're testing my memory again here, but I think I'm right, Vicente, he ran in the National Hunt Chase last year, ran a similar kind of race, plodded on for 4th or 3rd, he placed, or actually no, he travelled really well into the straight before then fading a bit. Nicholls may have just used this run as a prep. He may have laid off him at home for a while. He may now be spot on. I expect to see him in Scotland. He jumps well, he lobs along. I'm not 100% sure if he's just a slow plodder, but he clearly stays. He's lightly raced. He's quite unexposed over fences still. You would think Nicholls is going to get a win out of him, probably in a pretty decent chase, and he may need to win the Scottish National and a few others to overhaul Nicky Henderson in the Trainers' Championship. So that's another aside and another battle to keep an eye on, because they'll be trying to get as many winners as possible. So that was that. Then we moved on to the 5:30. Now this is, is this where I should have a rant? Let's have a rant. Not a rant, but so the winning profile for the for the Novices Handicap Chase, only 7 pointers. Ran within the previous 60 days, 0 to 7 runs in handicaps, placed on at least one of their 2 starts, all logical things there. Fitness, unexposed, in form. 7+ career starts. They were experienced, a bit battle hardened, but not too long in the tooth. And the market was a good guide for this race. Top 10 in the market, 21 or shorter. Then there were some other negatives and positives. I used those because they didn't really always necessarily knock out all the losers. That might have included winners, may have been outside of those parameters. So the winning profile was the place to focus on, and using any other stats if needed to help kind of lead the way a bit further. But that was that, and I don't know if anyone else, I'm clearly a convert to stats and big race trends, especially for 20 runner plus races, especially for handicaps. But the amount that they're just not mentioned on the broadcast media. I can understand ITV. Really, you don't want to bore people to death by talking about stats and this and that and the other. But some other racing channels who may be subscription, no one. Why do they not have anyone with a stats perspective? Horses in the festival, as they have done for the last 10 years, 20 years, if you have the right stats, and there are right and wrong stats, in my opinion, in my firm belief, there's clearly, all the evidence points to the fact that the same kind of horses run well, year after year. The same profile of horse runs well, yet no one mentions them. Now, we'll get onto a couple of races, the Arctic Fire win, Super Sun, well, Arctic Fire in particular, where the trends and stats can be blown out of the water. Fine, that happens. But when you're dealing with this many races and in this week, you want to give yourself the best chance, the best long-term chance over enough races. And they all say the same sodding thing. They all talk about form. Form doesn't really matter. It's a consideration, but it doesn't matter. The profile of the horse for the race conditions against the type of horse as run well consistently in the race is more important. There was experts talking about this horse beat this horse and carried X pounds here and there pounds there, and this ran well in this race here. It's all a load of nonsense. It is immaterial. profile, class, which is something I need to learn and do better on, and festival form. Really, those three things point you to a hell of a lot of winners during festival week, especially outside of the novice graded 1 races. They might point their way to those as well, but I don't look at them, so couldn't tell you. Why they just don't bother discussing when they just help point to winners is beyond me, but I don't really care, in the sense that I know this approach works, you know this approach works, and sod those who belittle and talk down the big race trends and stats approach, mainly because there's probably a lot of crappy stats and trends out there, and a lot of people look at the wrong things, in my opinion, but that's a debate for another day. So yeah, we had the novice chase winner. What can we learn from here? So that profile, which was the first 4 bullet points, only the first 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So I ignored the market. Obviously, when you're looking the night before, etc., you don't want to be looking at the market and that influencing you. Ignored the market, and it left 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And those of you who know the result will see that included the first tally east, the second and the third. Which way round did they come? I've forgotten. Golden Present second, 2 Tas third. And one of you, I believe, well done, used that shortlist and your own ability and put those 3 horses, Tally East, Gold Present, 2 Taps, you may have put the lot, I'm not sure, in single win bets and each way bets, but also forecasts. I think you remember saying you didn't do the tri-cast, but you know, the forecast paid pretty well, so well done. You used that information there. Forecasts and such exotic bets are far beyond my realm of ability at the moment. That's something else I should try and improve on. But there we go, they included the first 3. That profile worked. It really isn't that hard to get a shortlist of potential horses that might run well in the Festival Handicap. Now next year this same profile may have a blowout. It might. The year after it will run the winner again. That is how it goes. But what do I want to say about this race is put all 3 of those horses in your notebook for the simple fact that they were 6 lengths ahead of the 4th, who coincidentally was a qualifier on one of the system micro angles. Was it first time headgear or last time out one? I forget. I'll have a look in a second. But those 3 were way ahead, and it's probably, yeah, so there was a gap. Now this race, we'll see how the form works out, but that race was very strongly run, as predicted in the write-up. Using the pace maps on GG's Gold, it was apparent there were 10 to 15 horses who wanted to make all, not make all, but normally race prominently. And that's another thing. Generally in these races, jockeys want a position. They generally go hard. It isn't always the case, but it was clear before the race that it was probably going to set up for some closers and that everything in front would fall into a hole. That is what happened. We had a horse that won again. He had festival form and track form. Gold Present Drift, wasn't, well, uneasy, or he wasn't well backed. He travelled very well, quite a strong traveller. He may have used a bit too much energy, and I have in my mind, and let's see if that memory is correct, that he probably is better on flat tracks, possibly, or maybe worth keeping an eye on. It'll be interesting if they bring him to Aintree, because he did travel very well, and he is one to keep on side. Oh, this laptop really is slow, as happens when I record something. Anyway, you could look at him yourself. Oh no, there we go. Anyway, he's gone. Yeah, maybe flat tracks. 2 Tas ran well. I mean, they all 3 ran well. And Tully East, I think, ran with a bit in hand there. And he's fairly unexposed now. So that's on my mind. The old 2 courses, as I said before, I started to get into that when the first preview that I went to at Aintree, well, near Aintree, preview that John Morris sets up. What book does he write? Jumping Prospects, I think. Nice fella, top bloke. And yeah, we have Charlie Longston and Ben Pauling on the panel, who are Pauling is Longston's brother-in-law, I believe. Andy Holding of Odds Checker and other things An all-round good judge, it seems, and is a time boy to listen to. And I'll touch on some of his things in a moment. Some of the nuggets that he shared at the festival, or at the preview, that I ignored, or not ignored, but didn't absorb, let's say, despite writing them down. Anyway, Tully East, what was I going to say? I mean, he's unexposed, so put him in. 4 chase runs, he's 1-2 second. Now, I nearly, well, when I first went through the race the afternoon before, I put a line through him, crossed. But I was tired. It was about 10 o'clock at night. I thought, no, we'll come back to that in the morning, because you just make stupid errors when you're that tired. In the morning, new eyes, went through all 6 again. Now, when you're lazy and when you're tired and you want to cut corners, you look at beaten 19 lengths, beaten 20 lengths, rubbish form. No, I want something that's ran better recently. Look at the races. Grade 1 chase, Grade 3, and then novice chases, not handicaps. Look at that form. It's a festival, it's a handicap. Look at that form in the context of they don't want to be hammered by the handicapper. They're happy with their mark. They want to protect it. That's the mindset you need to try and find out. It's not a plot. It's obvious. I could see it. And people know my tipping record from the latter half of 2016. If I can spot it, anyone else can. So it was there, and he had a big field. He had a big field win in the chase as well, which caught the eye. And then there were the trainers. Cheltenham. He ran well in the festival the year before. 4 lengths there, decent run in a handicap hurdle. So he had festival form. The trainer hadn't sent many here, but a couple had placed. All the stars aligned. He was on the short list, 14-1. He had Dennis O'Regan riding, very patient, hold up in a race where I thought the pace might collapse. Job done. I'd like to say it was easy as that, but as festival handicaps go, he pretty much ticked every box that you want ticking, and kind of had to be a bet, really. So it was a good job I slept on that. Now, we're still on day 1. We're nearly to an end on day 1. You'll be pleased to hear. I've probably gone on for ages, haven't I? But hopefully you've enjoyed this whistle-stop tour. What do I want to focus on here? The Stan James Champion Hurdle. The start, Nicky Henderson, brilliant festival trainer. Was that his 50th winner or something mad? And he'd won this race now for however many times. I would just say the notes that I read in this notepad. Where are we? I'm going to flick through. This is from the preview evening, the one they held in Liverpool. Andy Holding said, and I made notes on the championship races. I didn't really care for what anyone said in the handicaps because, well, whatever. Buru Dairy said Henderson's on the times of their races last year. So did him and Yanworth, it was the same trip, same conditions, they were different races. But Buru Dare on the times of those 2 races was 15 lengths better than Yanworth. And now Alan Kings were a bit under a cloud at the festival last year, so he may have been closer but for that. But that was Andy Holding's way in, and he said adamantly, and I remember he said he cannot be out of the frame. If you can get 4-1 or 5-1 each way, he is not going to be outside the first 3. How right he was. He won. Did I listen? No. Did I bet in the race? Probably threw £5. Oh, I did. I threw £5 at the third. So he knows his stuff, and he did point the way to another horse a bit later on in the week as well, which I'll touch on. 410, not much to know there. Bar Apples J is just tough. I mean, you like to note tough horses. She is just tough. Headed, I think, by one or both. Just battle to be in the middle of a 3 and a pincer movement. You've got to like horses that just want to win, head down, gritty, determined. Brilliant. So that was that. What else? What's the final thing I can touch on day 1? We've gone through some of the shortlist. We've gone through the 3 races tips. Now at this point, we are what? Single farm payment. second by a short head, annoying, but we're, what are we, -1, -2, -3 points. Well, it was 27 at Betfair SP. I know some of you took that. Sadly, I didn't. 1, 2, 3. So we were plus 13 points. We were plus 25 points after day one. I had a 25-point budget. So after day one, going into day two, we couldn't lose on the week, and that should have given me a bit more flexibility when we get to the sodding Fred Winter, the race of doom, which I will get onto in the next video. The final thing I will touch on is just having a quick look at some of the micro systems and angles. These were never designed to back everything, mainly because a lot were untested and it may have led to the poorhouse. I will go, they're all saved in my Horse Race Base account. I will go through all the different festival saved angles just to see what the actual stats were, especially the placed horses. With the 250 we had on Tom Saw 2, so that highlighted him. Noble Endeavour, the jockey angle, that was the second. That was the Davy Russell angle, which would pay off for us later in the week. Single Farm Payment, the track last time out, second. So, you know, some good pointers there. What else? Limini. Oh yeah, this missed approach, first time headgear, 33 to 1 or under. I suppose I've put a kind of did not qualify, kind of a guide, but he was second at 50 to 1. I know Jerry, I think, maybe a few others backed him each way at 50s. And the 530 Powers Bomb, what did he have on? Yeah, so track last time out, the Leopardstown angle, and the jockey, that was another one for Jamie Codd, wasn't it? That was his first ride on the horse. Fourth, 25 to 1 into 22s, so that went quite well. And 2 taps again for Davy Russell. So that was a great day one, the kind of day one you want. I normally have a blowout, or did traditionally have a kind of blowout on an awful day one. So it was nice to not do that and kind of ensure that the worst case on the week was a loss. So that is day one. I've covered some of the more generic things, but there are other things that I will touch on as I go through. Hopefully you've noted down some of those things. Hopefully that was some of that was useful or interesting. I think the tips and the short list may throw up a few winners in the future, as well as some of those other horses I touched on. So do note those down if you care to do that. And until I look at day two, thanks for watching, and I will see you shortly.